5:30 to 7 o'clock. And there are two purposes really for the budget workshop. One is to go over the overall sense of the budget and the board as it relates to the budget for our new town manager, Bill Post, and get feedback from him. And the second is to review the CIP, the Capital Improvement Committee's recommendations with respect to a potential infrastructure bond to be on the ballot in November, and for us to discuss the items that would potentially be in that bond. Any vote on that would be at the regular select board meeting at 7 p.m. Okay, with that, so
Yeah, well, let
Bill,
me,
you want to kick it off?
yeah, well, I just wanted to, and I should have had these available to you in your materials, but if you just take one of these and,
Yeah, sorry, we're going to do the infrastructure bond discussion first, and then go into the overall
yeah,
discussion.
so you probably already have,
Yeah.
but I just brought it again, just in
great.
case.
Okay. Yep.
So what you have in front of you is a memo to the manager back in April that summarized those issues, infrastructure costs that were discussed during the budget process. And then also is a memo dated August 5th that is the list of capital improvement projects as recommended by the Capital Improvement Committee. So I think this is where we were discussing at our last meeting. And then the discussion came around to, should we include sidewalks or not? As well as several other things, such as the Walker Park seawall. So we have gone through, the Public Works Director and Megan and I have gone through a little bit of an exercise in trying to gauge how much it would cost to do some sidewalk work. And we do have some recommendations there, if the board wishes to see that. We've tried to rank the sidewalks. It's very difficult to do that in a short period of time.
Yeah.
But we've tried to do that. We do have, with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sections of sidewalk, we would recommend, if the board wishes to include sidewalks as an item for the infrastructure bond, the cost of those would be roughly $140,000 for 5 different sections of sidewalk. And we certainly can get into more detail of that if the board wishes to know what sections and the like.
Yeah, and just for background, Doug and Denise, we just mentioned that we're going to have the discussion, or we're entered the discussion now on the infrastructure bond, and then we'll follow that with the overall discussion of the budget overview for Bill, since we need to make sure that we get through this infrastructure bond first. And as a reminder for anybody who is listening in, at the last board meeting, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we approved the concept of doing an infrastructure bond in November with the intent of, figuring out the components of that at this workshop, voting on it at the 7 o'clock meeting. And one of the things that was suggested is that perhaps we we round up the bond to 1.5 million with approximately $150,000 in there for some other items, and one of those being sidewalks, which is how we got to where we're at right now. So yeah, Bill, I think that would be helpful if we talked about the sidewalks that you had in mind, just so we get some idea.
A couple questions on process, if I could.
Yep.
The Pathways Committee, Mr. Young, I think, provided you with some input on priorities, yes?
A while ago, yes. The priorities were like the Route 90 corridor. I don't have that with me. I went out and looked at
Okay.
what we have for sidewalks here. There was
not a lot to go on with their recommendations.
So can you help me with the definitions here to Jeff's question? My understanding is that when we're talking about pathways, we're typically talking about, like it's the Camden Rockport Pathways Committee. And we're talking about pathways from here to there, larger corridors, et cetera, whereas sidewalks are more in. town sidewalks.
The Pathways Committee has all means by which to get around by bike or foot in the purview of that committee,
Yeah.
including sidewalks, walking paths, and
So
other
from Camden,
bike paths,
from
et cetera.
Camden to the seafood, Graffham's, that's a pathway. They ride the bikes and walk as well.
But, so doesn't the Pathways Committee, well, it's in their purview, don't they tend to focus more on pathways as
Not-
opposed to sidewalks? No,
They
okay,
do
okay.
work with them, with some of the landowners,
Yeah.
but they also are working on, one of the priorities they'd like to see, along Route 90 to the high school
Right,
is
yes.
some new
exactly.
construction.
Right.
The top priority, one of them is the one that's in the works with Camden that they've taken the lead on with the grant,
Okay,
so that's,
But it does include, the Pathways Committee does look at quality of sidewalks,
Right.
ways about which to get around town, either bike, foot, whether it's gravel, pavement.
and it's a
concrete.
Camden Rockport Committee though?
Yes, it's
And
a
so you've
joint
got
committee.
Camden people looking at Rockport sidewalks?
Not necessarily. I mean, they talk about the.
And vice versa.
The overall big picture of how both towns can, benefit from, other than car
Yeah,
traffic, either foot or bike,
yeah,
and where the opportunities might lie that could be supported by the town municipal governments.
okay.
So do you want to know, you want to know what sidewalks that
Yeah, just,
we were recommending? Mike, I don't know if you want to go over that, if you want to start that discussion.
I will. On Russell Avenue, right by Mechanic Street, up around to Winter Street, there's a short section there that is really narrow and quite dangerous, right in front of your house. And we need to look at that and see, you know, how it would be determined to where the actual crosswalk should fall, because the sight line where people cross is right on the corner.
right,
But there is a section that is not well, it's very narrow, it's very dangerous. We've got people crossing in a really bad place. So basically, one of the recommendations that is a high priority that I see of people traveling is right from Mechanic to Winter Street, that section. That's one of the sections.
yeah, I wasn't aware that that was one of the things that you were looking at, but I can say, walking that all the time, that people come whipping around that corner too, it's pretty dangerous.
At what point do you want us to weigh in on these things? You wanna just go down the list,
Yeah.
or?
I'll tell you what I found. Our sidewalks are in pretty good shape. I tried to use
What town are you in?
your system that we used on roads. We reworded it and the system didn't work as well on sidewalks as it did. But for the most part, our sidewalks are in good shape. There's Spear Street, there's a short section of like 300 feet that's been there probably since the early 1900s, somewhere probably in the 40s or something, and there's pieces missing. There's sections of concrete missing, so there's some 3-inch trip hazards. It's grown in, it's narrow. It's a narrow street, so I guess before I would say we need to redo it, I would probably consider, with other areas in town of sidewalk that gets used, we at least get that removed and grassed in. As far as narrow and not in great shape, there's another place on Russell Avenue up by Doug's with a ledge. It's all brand new to the ledge. There's a short section right by the ledge. It's really narrow. I think we could get that into a legal 4-foot section with what we have for road there. Redo it to match with granite and concrete in that short section up to where it becomes new, and there's a shorter pathway as you get up by your house. That turns into more of a pathway than a sidewalk. But that section by your house is in good shape, the piece that's by your house.
Yeah, I don't have any complaints.
So the corner where the ledge I think that should be brought up to speed.
Well, isn't
So-
that sort of still the Russell
Russell
mechanic to
Avenue.
Winter?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's basically the same area.
Just, but there is a brand new section, or fairly new, it's in really good shape between that. There's probably 250 feet that's brand new from Winter to Beauchamp.
Oh, yeah, right, okay, yes, that's right, okay, yep.
So, right in the village, where we had the semi-high sidewalk refaced, we were able to get that redone. As far as in the village, some of probably the worst shaped piece of sidewalk that's going to pieces and it's needs some attention will be right in that. I think there's about 120 feet in front of those shops. So from the corner shop to the stairs, the decking on the section we had resurfaced, we should pay attention to that. That's getting quite cracked and West Street. So from across from Rare up to the old RES site, the upper end is asphalt. That's what the previous select board decided to do with the money that we got from the state to put the crosswalk. We had to connect that. There's about 200 feet between the RES site and Rare that's totally missing. Nothing there. And then from that 200 feet to Rare, in the village, that's probably one of the hardest shaped pieces of sidewalk we have. So I think that should be looked at.
The one
So-
that runs along Pascal?
No,
Or
it
just
runs,
on West?
runs from Rare up to the RES, the old RES site
Okay.
along Route 90.
So does that go, it goes to the RES site, but it wouldn't, like any development that's done on the RES site would affect
The-
that?
There is some sidewalk in front of the RES. It isn't by any means perfect, but it's not totally unsafe. So I would think, you know, if we started at the lower entrance and redone towards Rare as you come into town, that would not only look nice, but it would be a nice sidewalk. It's in front of Dave Jackson's is a pretty narrow spot that's like 20 inches wide or something. The hedges are right out over the pavement and there's not a lot of sidewalk there.
So basically, it's the 400 feet from Rare up toward RES.
To the beginning of the RES site?
Well, it's not quite,
Right.
no, it's still
Right.
shy of that.
Still shy of that,
Yeah.
okay.
All,
Yeah.
all total, it measures about 900 feet.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we didn't put in a sidewalk and then blow it away if there's some
Right,
kind of
right, we
RES
wouldn't wanna,
development.
with the RES site being possibly.
Yep.
So, that's what we really have for sidewalks that are in need. I've gone through the rest of town and looked at the sidewalks. If there's some cracking, and I was talking about Bill today, we've got like sections of 3 panels that will go bad near people's driveways, crack up. Getting somebody to come work on them is pretty tough. I had them set up for the last couple summers and they've never made it to pull it off, because it's small jobs but at some point, they need to be fixed, but I think those can be fixed in general maintenance. I don't think any of our sidewalks that we have,
What's your cost estimate for these projects here, Mike?
140, you said?
140 was,
Overall, it's about 140,000.
Okay.
Madam Chairman, would we have several members of the Pathways Committee here tonight? Would it be appropriate? I think it would, just to have them weigh in for a minute or two
Sure.
as to their thoughts on
Yeah, absolutely.
needs and things that, whether it's sidewalks or anything else that might be appropriate for a bond.
this one's that I.
Thank you, Owen Casas, Pathways Committee. I'm gonna hand it off to Jeff because he's wicked smart,
I apologize if I missed it. Was Rockville part of your short list?
No.
Only because we know we've had issues there. We recaptured it with all of the cutback stuff, but I don't believe that it was ever improved, and I have talked with a lot of folks at Rockville.
I was gonna mention Rockville again at the last, I think, at the last CIP meeting we had, that the price, you remember what that, 129,000, I think, was for a sidewalk in Rockville. And the understanding I get from that meeting was that wasn't something that was on the top of the list. Because we cut redoing the street, I believe, in half is what was talked about, and not touching the sidewalk in this bond.
Okay. All right,
Hey, Mike.
go ahead.
Luke?
Jeff Scott, I'm the chair of the Pathways Committee. And there is a sidewalk in Rockville, right? So it'd just be a repair.
There is a section, I
kinda
forgot
funky.
how many feet. There's a
funky.
fair amount, there's probably 700 feet over there.
Yeah, that sort of goes in a swale, sometimes in the
disappears,
swale,
right.
sometimes
Yeah,
not in the
there's
swale.
a
So it's-
section of
it is-
concrete and section of,
And then it gets funny
asphalt.
around the church.
Right.
The church, if you had to do something, the 200 feet around the church is the most important one.
They're really
Because-
trying to do some good stuff at that church.
Yeah, because that's where the people park, and that's where they walk. So, just to frame the discussion a little bit, I just want to refer to a survey that the Pathways Committee did of all the sidewalks. Just say that that exists. And that we talk about this as a group a lot. We sent a memo to you folks last year with our priorities, not only in terms of maintenance, listing the top 4 that we had cited within the sidewalk survey as being what we thought the most important are. Those were Warrenton Ave, Russell Ave, which is where you were, but very specific. The Route 17 and 90 intersection, which has got a lot of issues, and then Old Rockland Street in Rockville. Those are our top four. And then we went beyond that and listed out potential new constructions and where we're working towards in terms of setting the foundations, having informational meetings, applying for grants and all that kind of stuff. These are much larger projects that we will be working on. Primarily, they're focused around a couple of things, and I won't dwell on this too long because I will be back in September to give you a little bit of an orientation and history on all these items. We want to maintain your focus on the existing grant that is going to be gone out for bid again for Maritime, that sidewalk and signal and pedestrian crossing up by Maritime Farms. That's still out there happening. And most of the rest of our energy is spent on a long-term plan for Route 90 and Route 1. Route 90 because there's so many destinations for people along Route 90, the schools, the high school, the elementary school, MRC, the baseball fields, all those things line up there. And there's a couple of communities or subdivisions on the other side of the road. So there's some good synergy there if we could put something together that, not something we're suggesting as part of this bond, because it's going to take a lot of community energy to get behind those. And you don't want to jam something like that down the community. We want to have more like a charrette thing going on and things like that. That's where we are in terms of recommendations. I'm happy to resend that memo along so you have it in front of you and act as a resource if you need it in terms of whether you need more details. I apologize, I came in just a smidge late, so I didn't hear Mike's initial bullet list. But Helen said that it was pretty good. No. Yeah, Owen just was asking me whether additional funding was required for the maritime funding to, the grant match for Rockport, I think it's like 7.5 or 8%, something like that, of a match for us. And then the 12% comes from Camden to make the 20% match. So 12% from Camden, 8%. My understanding, as best as I can tell, is all that money has been tithed by the town. We have it. Yeah? That's it, yeah.
Right, we budgeted for it.
So that's a non-issue for this bond.
Right.
So if we look at Mike's list included Russell Street in 2 sections. Spear Street, Village, in the Village, there's 120 feet from the corner shop to the stairs, and then West Street, about 400 feet of it.
Yeah.
Your list has Warrington Ave, Russell Ave, I will assume that the Russells are all the same
Yep.
need. Route 17 and 90 intersection, how much of that is state and how much is town?
It's all town, I think.
When the state builds a road and builds a sidewalk, we inherit the sidewalk.
we
So
inherit the
from-
sidewalk?
From there on out, they're ours to plow, ours to maintain.
Yeah.
All right, and the old Rockland Street to Rockville, so there's 3 areas that you mentioned, Jeff, that Mike did not.
Yes.
And I have a quote, rough quote for the sidewalk at Old Rockland Road, and I had taken that off my list because it was $130,000 to redo what was there for sidewalk. And they'd, like I say, last I knew, the CIP and the board was talking about doing from, I think, Rockville to Rockland, so it wouldn't really include much of the side of where the sidewalk is on Old Rockland Road.
And just to guess, Mike, and you'll know better, but I walked over there, I'm sure you have too.
Yep.
There's some funky drainage, and I wonder if they're thinking of fixing that up too, maybe. And again, if you want to take a swing at it, I would just shorten it for the couple hundred feet around the church, if that was gonna do that. There's some raised and funny sections there that I don't, it wouldn't be anywhere near $100,000.
Right,
It's
just
the
to
other
redo the
ends that are
sections,
really
but-
weird, the outer ends. So it'd be something we could do for that community out
Sure.
there, so.
So, Mike, if I put you on the spot to spitball numbers, I mean, you know how much a sidewalk is every 100 feet? The 200 feet around the church in Rockville, what's your guess?
If you do asphalt, that'd probably be around $10,000, I think, right? And 20,000 if you did concrete with granite curb.
Right, right.
Yeah.
It's $45 a feet for asphalt on asphalt and $90 a foot.
So like you said,
Concrete
10
and granite.
grand and 20 grand.
20, so if you did it in concrete around Rockville, those 200 feet, there's 20 grand. Warrington Avenue, how much, Jeff, when you're talking about that one,
Warrington Ave, that's the area down by Glen Cove, Clam Cove?
Yep.
I don't know on what your history is with the town. That is specifically, we're real specific. This is referring to when we, the Pathways Committee has walked it, there's sunken grates and minor repair that's needed. So we're real specific on the addresses and where it needs to be done. The sunken grates are a hazard to the cyclists because they've gone down. And so when you're riding on the edge of the road, you can fall into those. So we cite those, and that's what we mean by Warrington. We're not asking,
so that could be more
that's
annual
more of an
budget
annual
stuff.
maintenance, like $5,000 or
So
something
we'll
like
take that one off the list.
There's
for now.
sections.
We're not asking for the entire sidewalk, it's just there's certain sections, and if you look at that, it says, 133 needs,
And I know where you're talking about
Okay,
with the grate. And
exactly,
yes,
so-
that's something that's in the general repair and.
we just want to, I just don't know
Okay,
where the line is drawn here.
Right.
it's
that's
major upgrade, 10-year plus life type thing.
So what about 1790, are you onto that?
Yep, 1790, is that big stuff? Is it annual maintenance?
It's annual maintenance stuff, but keeps getting pushed off because we've had it on our list for like 5 years. So and I think Doug, when I think you came up with this idea, is like, we keep shoving this off. Let's put it all together and get the money so we can do it. And I don't want to nickel and dime it and say, okay, there's 3,000 here and 5,000 here and all that, but unless you do that and you come up with $20,000, it's not going to get done.
Right. I'd be happy to take a ride over with you in the next
Yeah.
day or something.
Happy to.
Okay.
Happy to, yeah.
But does that get impacted by plans, future at West Rockport Fire Station and what the state may do with that
There's nothing,
intersection?
there's nothing on the
On that
fire
side.
station side.
There's nothing on that side.
Before we get into the fire department moving it, and I had looked and there was nothing in the forecast to do anything in that intersection for 10 years out, according to the
By
state.
DOT.
Okay.
And they had money then, and they were talking at least 10 years out, and now
I
they
think
don't
we
have
tried,
any,
yeah,
so.
I think we actually tried to sneak in when they were doing the signals out there.
Right.
So again, it wouldn't be an issue of fixing something just to have it.
No, and
It's
I don't
worn
think, I don't think what he's talking about is anything major, I think probably
Also
we can
not.
get that
These are
done
very
with-
specific areas that are like broken
Okay.
and gratings
But-
and things like that.
But the stuff around 17, we're not talking $25,000 and 10 years
Right,
of life
ju-
and
just-
long-term
just some
improvement.
repair.
It's repair,
Right.
so.
But again, it's just, it just doesn't get done.
All right, so can you explain the old Rockland Street to Rockville, 130K? How many, are we talking whole lots of feet here?
Yes.
You're talking pretty much the whole length of
Right.
Rockville
From-
Road.
From like
That was
17
that
Phil
down.
Street.
100K. That was
Yeah.
that 100K. It doesn't go quite to 17 on
It's
either end.
short a little bit, it's,
On
and
either
and we,
end.
you know,
Yeah.
if you
So that's where they were talking
re-engineered
about the
that, it'd
200
probably
feet by
be
the
close,
church,
but
right.
not to
No.
the end.
Yeah.
But the right of
I
way,
don't think so.
it's kind
Oh,
of
instead.
funky with the telephone poles and,
You know, and I'd submit,
can't have
you
the
don't
whole
need
thing,
it to go all the way to
Instead.
17, because there aren't any houses. There's only like one farmhouse down there. So it's the community that's using it, and they're on Rockville.
Isn't that where you're saying that it's $130,000 to do the whole thing? But if we could focus just on the portion
The
by
area
the
around the
church?
church, yeah, like a
That,
couple
that
hundred
200
feet.
feet,
Because
then
that's
that
where all
would
the
be-
people
yeah,
park when
so
they
it's-
come to
All
the
right.
church, and that's
So-
where they walk.
So of the input from the Pathways Committee, I'm seeing just the 200 feet around the church in Rockville, important. Warrington Ave, maintenance work. 17 and 90, annual maintenance work. Russell Ave, we got covered. And that's the input I got.
That's right, and we're
Miss
very,
anything?
the Pathways Committee tries to keep a very thin focus so that the town has very clear priorities from us. The list is much longer than this.
Right.
But we are aware of finances and all the rest of it, so we don't want to have a long laundry list, although we have one. We have to set priorities, and so that's what we're doing, is being very rigorous in doing that. I will say one more thing, which Helen reminded me of. A long time ago, maybe 10 years ago, the town redid, the town intended to redo the sidewalk on Main Street all the way to the town offices. And it ran out of gas at School Street. And it was committed and committed and committed, and it's never gone further than School Street. And what exists there on Main Street is, I don't even know if there's a white stripe.
there is a
There's a
white
white stripe on the other
It's
side. I think there's a white stripe, and it's,
No curb.
there's no
just-
nothing, it's just the road with a white stripe, which kind of works. But in terms of commitment from the town, that's still pending. The intent was to have the exact same beautiful construction that was done on Lower Main Street be all the way up to the town. And part of the rationale for that was the amount of traffic that was coming from the photo workshops. It's not the right
You mean
name.
media.
The media
Yeah, media.
workshops. Yeah, is that they walk up and down the town and they come around that corner, and then it doubles for the town employees and fire station, et cetera. So that's why, and that's never done.
So
And you have
the true-
that beautiful sidewalk on.
True sidewalk ends at
Summer
Summer
Street.
Street. and it's
Summer, I
just
said
a
school,
path up.
sorry.
So, and I have to say, I agree with what he's saying, and driving to the town office 100 times the last few days, working on this, the school has had a number of, I would say, new people in and out doing pictures and walking down, and there
Oh,
are
yeah.
a lot of people that's been walking down through
So,
there.
how much,
They have no idea of the purpose of that white line on the other side, so
So-
they're walking facing
They walk on
traffic,
either side, which is good.
not understanding that there is a
Yeah.
path on the
Right.
other side.
So that's kind of out there too, and I don't want to, it's sort of like, well, maybe it's on somebody's list. Maybe what we should do is put it back on our.
oh, so, Mike, how much?
I think that's left over.
There was money budgeted a few years, but it just never got done.
I don't know if there's a bucket that's, the remaining of that had been done, but I think the issue was that there was some more severe drainage work that ate up more money than anticipated. Certainly took longer down there. I don't
Was
remember.
that
I
the
could
new
ask Steve.
construction that
Yeah,
was
there was
done
some-
last year?
So-
So,
or
so to
before?
match the rest of the granite and concrete, your rough figures, napkin figures, Steve would call them, you're looking at around 80,000.
That's a good distance there.
It's like 800 feet, I'm
I
guessing.
would bet. I was gonna say 800 or 900.
So,
Bring you all the way to Route 1, past the town?
No,
Just to the town office.
and there'll be some drainage in there, so that number will go up. We'll have, 4,000 or 5,000 at least, maybe 8 in drainage, so it's gonna shoot up 100 grand easy.
Yeah.
I was,
I guess while you were right here, would you agree, and I've been trying to watch people traffic, but the section from Rare up towards RES, people are using that crosswalk a fair amount, as I see. Would you agree with that?
Crosswalk on Pascal?
No, the crosswalk, if you go up from Rare, the section that's missing the sidewalk, I'd just like to have clear
They walk on the school side
Yep,
until the
but there's a
sidewalk
section
starts. Until the sidewalk
missing.
starts, that's right.
But that, wouldn't you agree that traffic has picked up through there, and that's a fairly busy, I guess I'd just like to have the pathways feeling on if that's important, that,
It would be just me. I haven't talked to
Okay.
the group about that. And when we do our priorities and suggestions, we try to determine based on activity.
Right.
And since we have that crossing, since the PED crossing is, I see people using it more and more now,
Right.
which is great. And big picture, the idea is that the sidewalk will continue all the way from the village, all the way out to the high school, as I said. So the PED signal at Route 1 and 90 is not random. It's part of a long-term plan to take people up Route 90. So I'm speaking out of turn here for the Pathways Committee, but that certainly was the intent, is to have a sidewalk all the way up Main Street.
I would agree with that, though, Mike. I've
Main
seen
Street,
a lot
West
of
Street,
dog
sorry,
walking,
West Street,
kids on
I meant
bikes.
West Street, not Main Street,
Yep.
sorry.
thank you.
Helen, do you think?
Yeah,
I thought- Yeah, sure.
Okay, Helen Shaw, Pathways, and somebody who walks Spear, Russell, and down around the corner by those shops on 2 or 3 times a week. I would agree on Spear Street. I was walking it the other day. It's broken up, it's lifted all over the place. It doesn't really work, and we all walk in the street anyway because the bushes are growing out over it. So I think the property owners, if you talk to them, would say, go ahead and rip it out and make the road a little wider there. Russell, the 2 you mentioned on that. I'm a little confused about in front of the shops, because again, I walked that, and they did replace a large chunk of that, 2, 3 years ago from Ralston's Gallery down around, because it wasn't a pain.
Kind of, I think where it stopped, right where it started to turn to high sidewalk, because I think that was gonna be a little more complicated. 'cause I think
Yeah,
that may be
yeah,
all
but
the
it's
way
not
there.
really in all that bad a shape. It's perfectly fine.
For-
There's no-
in the village, if you look at it, it's, but yes.
Yeah, but I mean,
It
if you-
isn't terrible yet, but it's cracking up and sagging.
Yeah, but in terms of a priority, I wouldn't rate it very high. But the 2 Russell areas, yes, you're practically walking in the street because of, somebody did weed whack all the thistles out of there. Thank you to whoever did that.
We've been working on that.
so, Mike, just out of curiosity, and this is not intended to micromanage, but it's just to get an idea of the scope of some of these things. So, did you have numbers that you assigned to each of those Russell places and to Spear?
The
I-
top
I
5,
did.
Yeah, the top 5. Could you tell us what those are?
Russell Mechanic to first part?
The top 5. Yeah, Russell to,
That's a 300-foot section. Oh, that's on Spear.
It come out as a 9, is what you're asking, right? Yeah, that come out as a 9 to be done.
sorry?
That come out as a 9 on the rating to be done, was that what you were asking?
Nope.
No, no, no,
You
no.
gave us 5.
How much they cost?
How much they would
Oh.
cost?
What, the
Okay.
5 that total 140.
Yep. Yeah, right here, too. Russell at Beauchamp by the ledge. 27, yeah, basically 28,000.
28.
Okay.
Is that the second Russell
That's the
section?
second Russell,
That's
yeah.
the second one.
Okay, what about the first?
Yep.
Okay. Whatever's next.
Corner.
Russell,
You call that 15?
Russell Ave from Beauchamp Point to Mechanic
Yep.
is 14,602.
So call it 15.
Spear Street, Mechanic Street to the end is 33,251.90.
That's to remove it?
To do it all.
No, to
But that
replace
300 feet,
What-
to do it right.
But
Wait,
we were
wait a minute.
proposing to
That's-
remove
but we-
it.
Okay, there's 2 possibilities on Spear Street. One is to remove and one is to do it right.
Right.
So 33,000 is to do it right? Or to remove
300
it?
feet.
To do it right.
Oh, hold on, I need to back up and look at,
None of these costs considered removing it.
okay.
So Spear Street is down further, right there.
Yeah, that's 33.
Yeah.
To do
To
it right or
replace it.
remove? I'm sorry, do it right?
To do it correctly, yes.
Okay.
And when you say
and-
correctly, do you mean with concrete and granite?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's on Spear? And
Yes.
so, but what about removing it? Do you have a number there for removing it? Which you
I
seem to
don't, I
sort
did
of
not include
favor.
removing it.
Yeah,
And
you
that
talked
was-
about, you talked
yeah.
about the possibility of removing it or redoing it correctly, and then as Helen just said, that she walks it frequently and that probably removing it would be
It goes up the road and doesn't really go anywhere, it just
I
kind of.
remember it being
yeah.
described that way
Yeah.
before, that it's
Yeah.
like a sidewalk to nowhere, I think is what's
It
been
is,
said
it is.
several times.
And,
we don't
and
have
at,
a
and at
number
the
for-
moment, there isn't any curb with what's there, it's on Spear Street, it's just.
There's a little bit of.
Some of it
dirt
is.
and grass between.
Right.
But it's offset sometimes, it's a couple of inches.
Right.
So to
It's
remove
offset.
it, would that be like an annual maintenance kind of deal? That's just not
Yeah,
that
we
big a
would,
thing.
we would just,
Oh, remove it would just be.
written maintenance, yeah, just a day and another day of loaming.
Okay, so,
All right, so how did that help? Because I'm confused.
Yes,
Like it landed on your top 5, but it's a sidewalk to nowhere?
The Spear Street?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a sidewalk to, I wouldn't, my recommendation would be take it out
Yeah,
totally and not, and loam it in.
yeah. I think that makes sense.
It's, like you say, it's a sidewalk to nowhere.
We just,
And one more that I didn't talk about, and there's,
oh.
Let's not confuse the
Yeah.
matter yet.
Okay.
So before you get there, Mike,
Yep,
so,
yep.
so then what was the, number that you assigned to the, corner shop to the stairs?
that one's gonna be a little more difficult. I don't have a replacement number on that yet. That is hollow in there, and I'm gonna have to do some,
Okay.
getting some prices from concrete guys on how they're
But
gonna.
you must have
But
had
you-
something
yeah.
to come up with 140,000 overall.
I think that you used that in your,
I just used the base price and I figured.
But also Helen said it's not entirely critical right now either.
right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. Okay, so then the West Street one, rear to the,
RES.
RES.
900 feet, that would be not all 900, because like you say, some of that would be in front of the,
Of the RES site.
So 200 feet's
Well,
missing.
if you went from rear to the start of the RES site with granite and concrete, what would that be?
Is that a 200-foot section?
Yeah,
that's like 600 feet.
600 feet, yeah,
Yeah.
So it'd be about $60,000 if you did
Right.
that.
60.
If you did concrete and Granite.
Right, and I believe if we're looking at town ordinance, somewhere I can remember coming across new construction, our ordinance says we're supposed to put granite and concrete in the village, I believe. I would have to find that.
So what was the number used for village, in the village, the 120 feet from the corner shop to the stairs?
You used $100
100,
a foot. And it may be a little more than that,
and how long is that stretch?
120,
120 feet,
so 12,000, call it.
yeah. I think you'd probably be looking at in the mid-20s.
For what one?
That was in front of the shops, right? That's where we're at.
Oh,
All right, those sums add up to around 140, 150-ish, the numbers that you gave.
If I might, the Pathways Committee has talked about this before, and we've actually done a couple of cleanups on Russell Avenue on the ledge area. We have shoveled the dirt off of there to add a foot of width to the sidewalk, which exists.
Oh, yeah.
It's just under dirt.
We've done it the last couple of years.
Yeah, and so, I don't know if you're gonna put a little retaining something there to stop the dirt, otherwise you're gonna widen it, it's just gonna go across that
Right.
too.
Right.
All right, I just wanted to check to see if that was,
And I think the road is wide enough there, we can gain some space in the road as well to get that a little closer to a legal.
that hill just keeps dumping dirt,
Yep.
yeah.
All right,
Right,
this is
so-
boiling down nicely, though.
We need the spreadsheet.
Are we done talking about sidewalks for a minute?
Well, I've still got one more to,
okay. Do we, yeah, what's that other one?
Lime Rock Street from the new library or old library up to Hughes Street.
Yeah,
There's the same thing, there's a section that you can see that it used to be there, there's a little bit of a curb, it's probably 2.5. I think Doug and I have walked this and looked at it, it's more of a nuisance at this point than anything. I would recommend at this point where we're at with the street, it's according to, I guess, how long before that street gets looked at to being redone after the library's done. We probably should just tear that out and pave that small section that's in there, that so-called sidewalk, and just make it at this point part of the road.
that's consistent with,
And that would be just general maintenance under,
Under your budget.
And
the
that's what it
same,
says.
same way, same recommendation from Pathways.
Because, yeah, these things that go into a bond are long-term,
Right.
lasting, 10-year-plus life items.
You want more, let us know.
Okay. So, Bill, what did, what,
I think Doug had a comment about
go ahead,
sidewalks.
Doug.
Yeah, I've sort of been holding my questions
Yeah.
till the end here, and now I'd like to wax poetic a little bit on this. When I was first elected to the select board, I took a real interest in the sidewalks, and I went to Rockville, I walked them, I took pictures out at 17 and 90, I walked Russell Avenue, so I'm actually pretty familiar with this in Spear Street. And first of all, and I think it sounds like the board would agree with this, but I'm a big fan of putting maintenance before new construction. I mean, I think we ought to take care of what we have before we start doing new sidewalks. One thing I'd like to develop a little bit further, because we've talked about it here relative to Mechanic Street, and I would ask Bill to comment on this if he could. At the Maine Municipal Association orientation that I went to right after being elected, they were talking about town liability, and they said towns generally don't have much liability, except there is in Maine something called a pothole law.
Yes.
And I guess that means that if something happens because of a pothole in a road, the town can experience some liability to that. And I asked the question at that meeting, does that apply to sidewalks? And I was told, yes. I don't know if you agree with that or not,
The
or if
fir-
you want to look into it.
The first part of it, there is what's referred to as the pothole law, which basically says that if the town is notified
Yeah.
of a pothole and it's not corrected within, is it 48 hours, Mike?
Last-
24 or 48, it's a fairly short window.
24. If it's not
24
repaired,
hours, I
then we
believe.
could be liable for damage.
Okay, but
I don't
apropos
know.
to this discussion,
Yeah, I'm not sure if it applies to sidewalks.
okay, well, someone should look into that.
Yeah,
and
no, I
maybe
certainly
we
can. Yeah.
And the reason I bring this up, and I was afraid that Jeff and the Pathways Committee may jump all over me, but now I feel a little more comfortable bringing this up. There are some sidewalks, particularly out at 17 and 90, that at this point don't warrant maintenance. They're terrible shape. I think it's optimistic to think you could easily renovate those and make them nice. And I think that area should be torn up, at least for the time being. I understand that, the long-term plan. I agree with the Mechanic Street. I'd love to have a nice concrete and granite curbs there. But again, it'd be a major reconstruction, and I think the town is much better tearing that up. I also think that Rockville Street should be torn up, except perhaps for the church area. That makes sense. But if you walk that area, there are areas where there's a foot drop into a swale. And, you get an older person walking that at night, it's just it, and it's almost becomes what we would refer to as an attractive nuisance. Oh, there's a sidewalk here, and then someone falls into the gully. I agree with Lime Rock Street. I think that should just be converted to road. Again, I would love concrete and granite curb. That looks great. But barring that, let's turn it back into a road. Let's clean up 17 and 90, tear up the sidewalk and grass it for now. Let's get rid of Rockville Road, except for the area around the church. Let's do that up nicely for the people that park. And then, Mike, on Russell Avenue, you talked about moving the road a little bit. At one point, you and I had talked about this. Into
Basically,
Bobby
as you come
Brown's
around
right away.
a little bit around that corner where
Yeah.
the ledge is, I don't remember what that is, maybe 3 feet. And when they recommend when we do something, we try to meet the laws and bring them out to 4 feet. I don't know that I can get quite 4, but I think I've measured the road width around that corner, and I've got enough to get that sidewalk close to 4 feet, so it'll be you won't, two people will be able to walk side by side rather than
And
just
that
a
would move
narrow.
the road a little bit over into
Well,
Bobby
it wouldn't
Brown's.
it would just take a little bit of road away, so you'd be losing probably 10 inches to a foot of that road, because it's a little bit over.
Well, how much
the
room
width.
do we have on the other side of the road with our right-of-way and
I
Bobby
would have
Brown's?
to look at that right away and see
Yeah,
what that is up that side.
because again, it's a terribly dangerous area. People walking there with their dogs
Right.
and,
It's terrible.
it's just asking for trouble.
Right. And getting if we did keep it on that side with a ledge, having it out to more of a legal sidewalk would be much better with somebody with a dog than
Yeah,
it is right
except then
now.
you're gonna have a narrower road, was already kind of
Right.
narrow. All right,
It-
so I got that off my chest.
All right, when I look at, we're going.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, Owen Casas again. So that area of 1790, I would only just ask that maybe you think about the districts within town that are zoned commercially, with that being one of them. Now, on the 17 side, it does not go for an abundance of length, but from either side of 90, it is zoned commercially. And then I believe the entirety of 90 is zoned commercially as well. So I'm not providing any solutions, but more just probing the question of what is your intent with West Rockport, that 17 and 90 area. I know that there are always perpetual conversations about a village this or this and that, and people doing development, and then typically it falls through, and that's always a shame. But if the town has a longer term or a medium term strategic vision on how they potentially want to cultivate that area of town to be slightly more robust, doing a backpedal for tearing up the sidewalks just might play into some of that thinking. Specifically, Vern Hunter walks that often. I think Vern's getting a little too old for that now.
But that sidewalk is there so people can get to the post office. That is specifically why it was put there.
And
yes,
when it's getting up to Pleasant, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with you, but at that Pleasant Mountain, because it wraps around Pleasant and goes up Pleasant, like not far at all. But then it comes down, it's just, you know,
We're talking Rockville,
Reservoir.
17 and 90.
Rockville Street.
17 and 90.
Oh, 17 and 90,
Yep.
yeah, okay.
It's just, you know,
Yeah,
it's one of the, there are crossroads that are all zoned commercially in town. It's not the only one. But it is that 17 corridor and 90 corridor, and specifically at that intersection on either side or on all sides, it's zoned commercially. So that's something that you all need to figure out on, you know, are we setting up a TIF there? Are we gonna be strategic? Are we gonna try to incentivize people? So as you think about potentially tearing that up, I would just throw that out there into your thinking about what do you wanna see in West Rockport? And if that developer does come along, as they've talked about often in some, you know, that whole big area behind the cemetery there on Park, you know, maybe they do come across some money and they want to reinvigorate West Rockport, which I would love to see. So just some food for thought.
and let me just respond briefly, because I understand what you're saying, Owen, I get it. But, you know, we're talking about a bond that's coming right up in the near future. And I think the fact is, I think it's misleading to say that those sidewalks out there just need some maintenance. You know, really, you're talking, they would have to be reconstructed in their current configuration. You'd have to reconstruct them all. So, again, with the town facing potential liability there may be development at some point in the future. I would just say, get rid of those sidewalks for now, put some nice grass in, and if a developer comes along, that can all be revisited in the future.
Well, and I can say that obviously if we were to get rid of the sidewalks, that would be a maintenance issue that we would handle within the budget itself, and it's not currently in our project list for this year anyway. When it comes to planning for the future, I'm fully on board with what you're saying, Owen, one of the things that I mentioned when I was going through the hiring process was the need for a comprehensive plan update so that we can take a holistic look at where the town residents want to see development, where they don't want to see development, where they maybe identify the West Rockport area for, you know, that type of development, and to include additional sidewalks, the sidewalk along Route 90, you know, to connect all of the schools and the like into the village. You know, but that's a long process, as you're well aware. That needs to start.
And I'm positive we could look at all the sidewalks and we could find mutual agreement on, geez, this whole thing just needs to be torn up because there's no point. Specifically on that area, just maybe be thoughtful and strategic about which ones make absolute sense to tear up and which ones would kind of be that backpedaling as it relates to some potential comprehensive planning in the future. And love to see a TIF zone out there or something. I don't know. Are we tapped out on TIFs? Thank you.
Okay, so I think
And just I'm sorry, Devin.
Welcome to Pathways. We don't stop.
We don't stop. The other overlay, adding to what Owen was talking about, is that we, as the town does, we look at the 5 communities of Rockport, and we're very aware that a lot of energy and money goes into the village, and we try to maintain an awareness of the traffic proportionally to those smaller areas, the foot traffic that occurs out there, and that's why we always have them on our radar. And that's something that showed up in spades when we did a survey of all the households in Rockport and asked them, if you were going to do maintenance on sidewalks, where would you do the maintenance? And no surprise, everybody said it was in their backyard, right in front of their house. That's their number 1 priority. So,
Shocking.
not naming any names, Doug, but that Russell Avenue needs this work because people walk dogs. They walk dogs on a lot of sidewalks in front of their houses, so just be aware of that. All right, thank you.
do we want to continue to talk sidewalks here, or do we want to talk that in the select board meeting when it comes to the decision making? And the
I
7
think it'd be
o'clock meeting.
helpful just to get an idea if
Okay.
you're, if the board is wishing to include a number for sidewalks.
Okay, and then, but before we do that, you wanted to turn it to something else. Does it make sense for us to finish the sidewalk thing, not knowing what it is you want to
Well,
bring up?
I can mention it real quick,
Okay.
because it was on the board's original list back
Yeah.
in April about the Walker Park seawall. So I thought it would bear discussing that we do have an estimate that's a real, we'll call it a loose estimate from an engineer about what it would take to basically stabilize the town share. Now, again, I haven't reached out to
Yeah.
the abutting landowner at this point, because we just haven't had the time to do that, but I will do that. I do plan on, on doing that. But to stabilize the town's side of that, we're looking at much less than the $400,000. We're looking at $100,000. So, and that's with stabilizing riprap, loam, and a permanent anchored turf stabilization on the top part of that, so that you get rid of the erosion, doesn't continue with the exposure there. But again, that's just the town section. That would have to be in conjunction with the landowner, because if you did the town section, it wouldn't make any sense. It would simply get undermined.
Is the landowner roughly the same magnitude of cost, or?
It's probably at least one-third of the total distance, would be my guess. One-third to close to half.
Yeah, I think
The fence
probably-
runs down darn near the middle of it.
So
Deborah
looks-
Deborah
Looks
looks at
like
it
they
every
have
day.
about 50 feet.
So
that
33 to
bank.
50,000.
Well, we do have $8,000 in the budget this year for the engineering study, don't we?
Yes, yeah, so,
So,
Yeah,
yeah, but that was just a rough estimate from the
Yeah.
engineers, so, we certainly could do the study, but I will be reaching out to the
But,
landowner
you know-
just to,
Yep.
so,
Another option, when it's down to that level, I won't say down, I mean, but compared to $400,000, it's down to that level.
yeah,
Once you have commitment from the budding landowner, and you've got the engineering done and a good locked-in price, we could put that into an annual budget and approve it.
you could,
It might tip us over the LD1, but
yes, yep, you certainly could. And it would most likely tip you over LD1,
it would,
and it's manageable though.
but it's within,
but it's not the $400,000
It's not the
number that we were that you
$400,000.
were looking at before, because that certainly is a non-starter. So I just wanted to throw that
yeah.
Okay.
in there
That's
while you were
helpful.
having
Thanks.
that discussion.
all right, so who wants to start with,
Well, go back to sidewalks real quick,
Yep.
if we could. What I came out of that discussion with, Russell Part 1, 15,000, Russell Part 2, 28,000, Village Corner, store to the stairs, 15,000, round numbers. Okay, West Street, 600 feet of it, $60,000. Rockville, 200 feet of it, $20,000. Main Street, town office, that whole stretch, $100,000. For a total of 238, call it 240.
I had the exact same list, although I had 20,000 for the corner
In front,
shop
right?
to stairs
Yeah,
instead of
'Cause
15.
I don't think our $100 a foot is gonna work in that
So I think it's
section.
20,000.
Well, then just round it up to 250 total.
What was the third item on your list?
Sorry, Village Corner, store to stairs, we're saying 20,000.
Okay, yep.
So it came out to a total of 248, call it
Did your
250.
list include the removal of Spear Street?
I did not touch Spear Street, no.
'Cause that's
It
No,
sounded
because
like
it-
that was maintenance
Fair
stuff.
Street, Public
it
Works
not
can take
bond?
care of that, and
Okay.
Yeah.
I just will need a go-ahead that that's okay to do.
Yeah, we have
Okay,
to
so
be,
the-
sorry. We just have to be, keep on thinking, this is long-term,
Right.
10-year plus life stuff, because you don't wanna be paying for a sidewalk in the 10th year that you removed in the 8th because it wore out.
Right.
It's gotta be long-term, big stuff.
And one of the things that we talked about at the last meeting was there was some support, and I'm not saying it was a majority, we never, really went that far, but there was some support for taking some of the public safety, town office, harbor paving. I think those were the three that were mentioned as being potential ones that we could put off that would be in regular maintenance. It was suggested. All I'm saying is that that's possible, or playing around with this list further, like that, and then adding to that, that delta to get us to 150, you know, could make that list, which matched my list, possible, within the 1.5.
My concern there is that, from my understanding, and still being a new guy, is that those things that were mentioned and that you've just mentioned,
Yep.
the paving and the exhaust systems and the vault
Well, I didn't
suppression
mention the
system.
exhaust, just the paving.
Okay. Well, those things had been in the budget, and then they were taken out,
Yeah, right.
Every time.
said to put
Yeah.
into the bond, so
Yeah, yeah.
we have to have a
Well, so was the
commitment
seawall.
someplace.
I mean, the
Yeah.
seawall was too.
Yeah.
And so were the lime kilns.
Sure.
So we took all those things out with the idea of putting them in the bond. So there's some things that, obviously, some things are not getting in the bond.
Right,
So,
right. My personal feeling about the public safety paving is that we really need to do that. I don't know
Okay.
if you've been over and seen the gap between the pavement and the concrete floor,
okay.
but it's getting more significant. And the issue there is the weight of those trucks going in and out of the building.
Gotcha.
It ruts, creates problems there.
So that would be your priority of those 3 pavings?
That would be my priority. I haven't spoken with any of the other department heads when it comes to that, but,
Yeah.
but that, just looking at that last week, it really needs to be done. I would do it differently than just pave it. I would excavate,
Put a pad in.
excavate, put some base in, compact that, put insulation in, and then put concrete apron for 6 to 8 feet out from the building. Then you won't have that rutting happen ever again. I don't know what the price for that would be. I haven't even had an estimate, but
I would have to look. It may rut eventually. What happens in the summer is that pavement gets hot. The truck, I think by law, there's supposed to be like a 3/4 inch lip where it meets that. It's not
Right.
supposed to be exactly smooth, but
Right.
that bumps.
it's not supposed to be 2.5, 3
Right,
inches.
no, not at all.
Yeah.
So
but
you
that
wouldn't
is
have
what
to
happens.
excavate far, but like you say, and if you come out 6 or 8 feet from the building, put some good base in there
Yeah,
and
yeah.
built it up.
Owen, did you have a comment?
And I didn't want to detract from your overall bond conversation, but for the edification of Jeff and for us to bring back to Pathways, in the event, so I'm making the assumption that Mike will flesh out some of these numbers better prior to the full bond that you're going to present to the town and ask for approval. When you get to a place to where you've run the numbers better and it's not, cocktail napkin numbers and $20,000, and you realize that you're going to have to cut potentially one of your sidewalk projects, which is the low person on the list, so that we can just bring that back to Pathways and say, of the 4, these ones are very solid and stable because of funding. This one is slightly questionable because we're not entirely sure, just for us to wrap our heads around it.
We didn't weight the 6 that we listed, Owen.
Okay.
Mike, one thing when you consider this, again, on the Russell Avenue area there, can we at least give consideration of moving the sidewalk over to Bobby Brown's side? Because the sidewalk as it is now comes up, crosses Mechanic Street, and then you're forced to cross there. But if we moved it over to Bobby's side, came up in front of Bobby's house and then Goodrich House, and then crossed over more near where Valerie's house is, I think it would be safer having it over there, and we wouldn't have to worry about sort of doing a half-assed job that Jeff kind of referred to, dealing with the ledge and the stuff coming
That
down.
actually was, we talked about that in the Pathways Committee. It's like, oh, we need to fix this. This is just a mess.
Yeah.
The way that people are crossing back and forth there is bad.
So can you at least give that some thought?
Sure, yeah.
Make that far less of a blind curve then.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
Blind
Scary.
curve, people wouldn't be walking on the inside there. Plus,
Right.
But you're saying,
there's a crosswalk across Mechanic Street.
right,
But
but
then
as you
it
get
sort
up,
of turns
as you get
into-
up to where the farm owns the
Yeah.
house, where the brand new section is.
Yeah.
It's just saying cross from the right side after you get around the corner.
Yeah.
Come over to the new section,
Yeah.
go up to the ledge, cross again, and get that away from
No.
the, okay.
Oh, the ledge up, no, I would,
Okay.
up there you'd have to continue to deal with.
Okay, so you're talking about the ledge right on the
Yeah,
corner,
right,
okay,
that
yes.
corner
Yes,
there.
I've looked at that and thought that we've gotta find the very best where we can get every inch of line of sight
Yeah,
there, but I agree that that probably should come on the right side of the road and.
and cross over
Yeah.
somewhere near Val's house or
Yeah,
um,
we'll,
up there.
we should look at that and, you know,
Okay.
I've looked at it some, but yes, I agree with what you're saying.
10 seconds.
Yes.
I owe Owen a better answer than I gave him. My thoughts are in alignment with Doug's. The maintenance jobs would take priority over the new in this list on sidewalks. Yep.
So,
I'm adding up to 1.632.
1.632, is that,
That's 250 for the 6 sidewalk items and on top of the 13, or 1.382.
So that's not taking any of the town office paving or harbor paving?
I didn't do that.
Yeah.
No, I took that list that you see right there, the 1382, and I added the 6 sidewalk jobs at
250.
250.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, what were we talking about removing from this list?
well, this list, I just mentioned that at the last meeting, there had been some suggestion of removing some of the paving, the public safety town office, harbor paving, on the theory that, well, maybe not the harbor one so much, but that the other two at least could be worked into a budget. There was discussion about the exhaust systems, but people tended to want to keep the exhaust systems in for, safety purposes. That was my recollection of the last meeting. If it was yours, I don't know.
I mean, I think the thought was if we needed, with the sidewalk additions, if we needed to peel back to hit the magic number of 1.5, if we still even believe 1.5 is a magic number, it was not necessarily a scientific number.
Right.
It was what do we think we have the tolerance to be able to fill and push through, or not push through, but certainly send to voters. And, is 1.6 a bad number?
Right.
Well, and you could get close to the 1.5 if you took the Main Street sidewalk new construction
You could.
and the town office building paving, then you're at 1.5. If the priority is not, is to maintenance versus
Right.
new construction of sidewalk.
I am with you on that thought.
If you wanted to be at 1.5.
If you have to be at 1.5, what would come out of the pot? Again, to Doug's point earlier, I'd rather maintain what we have than
I agree.
build new. However, a bond package just to do maintenance-related activities that we didn't get to doesn't always feel good.
And especially since that Main Street one has been put off for so many years, and was always intended, and with the increased traffic, as noted by Mike and others with respect to.
That's a big gap in our sidewalk.
Yeah,
I would not lose sleep proposing a $1.6 million bond that includes it all.
And on the exhaust system, just from what I've seen, you're talking about the one in Public Works?
yeah,
There's 2.
to Public Works and Public Safety.
Public safety.
It really should be in there. My guys would probably be the first to say, oh, we've been this long. Down the road soon, like the next year or so or two, I would expect MMA is just gonna say, you know what, that's gotta be in here.
Yeah.
I don't think they're gonna give us a choice just from
Yeah.
when
We
they
didn't have
come
a-
and walk through with us. I
Yeah.
see that coming.
We did not have an extended debate on whether or not to pull that.
No, the only discussion was around the fact that you had said that with upgrading the new trucks and it kind of changed the exhaust
Right, they have to
requirements.
come in. Yep.
But also recognizing that we still do have some of the older trucks for which we do still need it. Right.
And the guys sleep in the section that we actually work in, so if we brought them in and they run, that is the section we sleep in while we're plowing.
Hopefully not when you're plowing, but
All right.
when you're taking a break from plowing.
Apropos of our
We,
long
we
way.
have to have a little bit of comedy while we're talking about all the numbers, right?
All right.
Okay, well, we can't make any decisions until we go into the select board meeting anyway. So does anybody have anything else that they want to talk about with respect to the infrastructure bond?
I'd like to thank the Pathways Committee for
Yeah.
providing the detail and the input. Thank you.
Anytime.
I appreciate you guys being here, because it's all new information to me, as you know, Owen. It seems like all the committees are very much like that, so,
Yeah.
yeah, so I appreciate the information.
All right, so we have 20 minutes left, and the initial purpose of the meeting was to do an overall, look at the budget and the perspective of the board with respect to the budget. And I still think that we could do a sort of 40,000 high-level view of what, at least pass on to Bill what individual board members, their sense of the budget and where it is, where it should go, and that sort of thing. Does
Well,
that-
I think that would be very helpful. I've been through the budget quite a few times on my own, and I've also sat with Megan for a couple of 2 or 3 hour sessions as well to go into the details. So having from the board kind of your, like you said, your 40,000 foot view of what it is and what your goals were. And I understand that I'll throw my 2 cents in there when it comes to LD1, which, when it was first enacted, it made sense. It was during a growth period in the state, and so it kept those municipal budgets, not the school budgets, unfortunately, it doesn't seem, but it kept municipal budgets down with the LD1 requirements. But when we have the slow period of growth that we've been going through for the past several years, and I've seen it in multiple different areas, and my colleagues feel the same way. It's very, very difficult to budget from a municipal perspective and stay under that cap. And there are many municipalities that pay zero attention to it. And they look at it from a budgeting perspective of their own community and what it takes to run the community and to run it well and provide what the residents expect for services. So they take a different tact when they look at it. There are no consequences for going over LD1. I'm not one that wants to see the tax rate rise. I don't want to do that. I'm conservative when it comes to finances, as you know. But at the same time, my feeling is any community's citizens have desired need for services. And they'll show whether they're willing to pay for those services or not. And so I think my personal philosophy is that it behooves being able to look at the services that are being provided. Obviously, if we can create efficiencies, we'll do that. And I think there may be some in the budget already that I've identified, but it's not going to save huge amounts of money by any stretch. But that's my perspective on LD1, so I thought it would be beneficial just to have that out there for your knowledge. But I certainly want to hear from board members as to this budget, as to what your overall thoughts are with it and what you're trying to accomplish and what you would like to have accomplished and maybe couldn't with the budget as well.
Do you have
Happy to
any,
go first.
do you have any specific questions? Also, I think it would be good for us to hear what you have for questions to the select board as to why, or any clarity that we could provide,
Or do you want us to go
Another
first,
perception.
and then you can ask some questions?
I think it would be beneficial if I heard from the board members and then maybe if I could ask questions of that.
Doug, you
because-
want to go?
Yeah, very simply, I feel that the board should depend very strongly on Bill's expertise. When we were looking for a town manager, that was one of our 3 primary goals. I've done 2 town budgets. Denise has done 0, as far as I can tell. I'm sure Bill's probably done 30 of them. So,
Close.
first thing I would like to hear is a formal presentation from him on where we are with our current budget, where he sees efficiencies and what could be cut back on or improved on to make us more efficient. So I'm going to rely heavily on his expertise. Number 2, I agree with Bill now on LD1. When I first started on the board, I thought it was a great idea to keep us under LD1. It provides political cover for the board, but I think in a lot of ways it kicks the can down the road. apropos to our discussion tonight about sidewalks and other infrastructure issues. Again, one of the 3 points that I ran on sort of as a select board, I think the community expects good education, I think they expect safety, and I think they expect infrastructure maintenance. And I think over the last 2 years, while we have done a good job of keeping the budget down very close to, if not below LD1, I think in the long term, the community pays the price in terms of infrastructure, delayed maintenance that will add up. So that's kind of my 2 cents worth.
Do you want to add anything, Jeff?
Yep. Well, when you look at the many millions that the town takes in and the $4 million that you have to spend, that's manageable within this group. And that's the part that I think people don't always appreciate, that our intake, 67% goes to schools, a certain percentage goes to the county, and only a fraction is left over for us to manage to do everything we need to do. The priorities are emergency services and public works. If you look at and the support of those, we've tried to do that in the last budget for sure, and I'm sure other select boards have done the same earlier. Opportunities in the current budget or areas where there may be watchouts. We way underfund our paving. $285,000 to pave the streets we have. If you do the assessment and compare other towns and their annual spend versus ours, the ratio per mile is way off. We estimated over, $1 million if we were to maintain roads to an excellent level, and that's certainly a lot that we can't do. So, but there's some number in between that may be better. People and the town organization, I would always continue to look for organizational design opportunities to maximize efficiencies, and certainly the leadership, human resource, and staffing portions of the organization, and those functions in terms of salaries, compensation, to make sure that they are on par so that you can retain and keep the best folks. Then lastly, I think there are opportunities in harbor revenue that we need to make sure that we capitalize on, either in rental of space or transient docking fees, whatever it may be. That's the short version. Thank you.
So I would echo a lot of what Doug and Jeff have already said. I would say that Jeff and I, having gone through only one budget cycle, we were, I don't want to speak for you, but we were a little bit more intent on keeping to LD1 this budget cycle, only because it was something to shoot at. And so Rick came in with, his suggestions, and he needed to have something to, something to shoot at, something, some kind of goal to come into when we asked for an LD1 budget. We wound up, adding some things, taking some things away, and then in the end, we were underneath LD1 largely because of some last minute bond payments that weren't going to have to be made until the following fiscal year. But we were pretty well at LD1 up until that time anyway. I do think that in the last budget cycle, we stressed the need to make sure that we get, and I know that you're on top of this, getting the wage survey, et cetera, done, and to make sure that we are treating our employees appropriately, paying them appropriate amounts. I echo what Jeff has said clearly about our infrastructure. We need to be spending more money on, taking a look at, sorry Mike, some of our roads. It's pretty obvious to anybody who travels these roads. And I think that, a number of us have been saying that we really want to focus more on revenue, and that's why I know some of us have been spending quite a bit of time on the RES site, and other ideas that we would like to pursue to generate revenue. Of course, we all have to be mindful of updating the comprehensive plan and being consistent with that. So I think that, I don't know, my sense is from what you're hearing and what I heard during the budget cycle is that while it was a place to start, it's certainly not something that we're absolutely wedded to, and we do see that it does, harm us in some ways. That said, there, as you said, probably are some efficiencies that we can achieve as well.
Yeah, I think there are. It's just, again, it's not gonna be huge cost savings, but at least it would balance some of the other needs out somewhat.
We were pretty tight with the numbers this time around.
Yes. Yep. Well, I think that helps, and I think my goal would be, and I'm not one that wants to put meetings upon meetings and workshops upon workshops, but I think it's important before we start the budget process to have a similar discussion. What are your goals going into the next budget planning process so that we can get some feedback from the board members? Hopefully by then I'll have some thoughts on some efficiencies that we can create and have a much better handle on where we are than I do currently. First month has been a whirlwind, that's for sure. But I think we're slowly getting there, where I can, in a couple of months or so, be able to say, here's what I see, here's what I would recommend, and go from there. But I think it would be very valuable for department heads to have that type of discussion, from the board beforehand, before we dive into the budget process. Yeah.
Denise?
Yep, Denise.
Yeah, I heard a lot of good things. I mean, I agree that LD1 can, I guess maybe provide some baseline of what you might be willing to do as a community, but I also have heard a lot about the paving issues and things where we're gonna end up paying more money because we didn't spend the money in an ongoing sense to maintain our road systems. So I really heard a lot of good things. Obviously, I wasn't part of the last budget cycle, so this is I'm on a steep learning curve for that, but I believe in efficiently using the taxpayers' money, getting them the best bang for the buck, and I'm hearing that from my fellow board members and Bill as well. And I think if we do that, whether we're above or below LD1 is sort of irrelevant. We're providing the town the best services we can for what the town needs, and we'll listen to all of you, those here and those listening to us on live stream, because we work for you. So that's sort of where I come out.
If I could just add on LD1, 10 seconds worth. Bill, another reason that we targeted that, which was always in the background, is two things. We approved a $1.5 million bond for library construction at the same time. And that obviously is going to impact tax rates. The second thing is that we recently, within the last couple of years, had a valuation decrease of almost $100 million, about 10% right off the top of
That's a major hit.
valuation, which was a major hit.
Yeah.
Those two items themselves made us very budget sensitive.
Yes.
Plus the middle school.
Certainly.
And, that's right, and a middle school approval, I apologize.
And Mary Taylor.
And a $6 million office upgrade, which obviously, comes out of the kitty, so.
Yeah.
Those things were all very recent, very intense.
Absolutely. I understand that fully.
Okay, so we have about 5 minutes left before the, 7 minutes left before the select board meeting, so you want to take a quick break, and we'll reconvene at 7?
Is there any way we can get